Hey, what's on?
Not much. You guys ready to start the show?
I think I am.
Absolutely.
All right.
Bring it on.
Let me pull up my notes. All right. Hello and welcome to Next to Nothing, a show where we talk about how to waste your time and not your money in gaming. I am your host, Danny K. With me, as always, the wonderful, beautiful, enrapturing renditions.
Wow, okay.
I don't know if that was...
all the compliments. How's it going, guys? Hope you're all incredible.
And joining us this week, Mr. Brandon Cole, a.k.a. SuperBlindMan. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing great, as always. Thanks for having me on the show. I very much appreciate it. And hi to all the viewers out there checking us out.
Yes, and real quick, we got connected by a mutual friend. I wanted to give them a shout out real quick. A big shout out to Marcus Axford and all the other folks over at Gamerfuel Studios for connecting us with you, Brandon.
Yeah, shout out to them. Good people, those people. And this is just one result of the things that they're doing, so it's good stuff.
Yes. So for the folks who don't know who you are and what you do, would you mind giving them a brief rundown and all the places they can find your stuff?
Absolutely. Here we go. I am a creature of many hats. I am a blogger. I am a streamer. I am a podcaster. I'm a hobbyist voice actor. I've been in Pillars of Eternity, if you don't believe me. I am... I'm on Twitter. I have a website. I'm first and foremost, though, I'm an accessibility advocate for blind gamers in video games, and I'm actually a consultant in the game industry for blind gamers as well. So if you want to find me, you can do so in a lot of different ways. Just look for SuperBlindMan on almost everything. That's Twitch, that's Twitter, that's YouTube. The podcast, to provide some context here, I'm part of a movement co-founded by my fiance. We call it the Breakdown Walls movement, and the goal is to break down the barriers between the disabled and non-disabled out there. Gamers, streamers, and just everyone. Just break down the barriers, bring people together, and force people to realize that we're all gamers and we're all just doing the things we do every day, and we're just we're all people and just have a good time. So to that end, we have a Breakdown Walls Discord. You can find that at breakdownwalls.net/Discord. That's a super easy link, just so you know. And if you want to check out my podcast, you can do that too. I do a podcast that provides multiple perspectives on gaming news. I cover gaming news, but then I cover it again from the accessibility side, from the disability side. So it's providing you two perspectives on sometimes the same thing. You can find that at breakdownwalls.net/podcast. We do interviews as well. I have some pretty cool interviews under my belt, and there you go. So that's just basically me, kind of like that's like scratching the bare minimum of the surface, but there you go.
Yeah, so
right on.
Anyone that's live, I want to thank my mod, Mr. Greenlee, for doing a shout out to Brandon's Twitch channel. I also provided a link to his website. That stuff will all be in the description of the episode, depending on where you watch it. If you're on the regular podcast feed, check the episode description and of the VOD and all the other stuff like that. So yeah, let's get right into it with just like a discussion on accessibility. And if you don't mind, if we could kind of just set some semantic parameters here.
I like that term, semantic parameters.
Yeah, just some definitions, so anyone who might be confused about what accessibility might mean. How do you define it when you talk into your consultancy?
The biggest thing I think to mention is the definition of accessibility itself. But to talk about accessibility, we should talk about inaccessibility. And inaccessibility essentially means a barrier to access. So when something is not accessible, it doesn't necessarily mean you cannot in any way enjoy that thing, but there's something that is preventing you from enjoying it, something that you may have to work around, or something that you may have to fight through to enjoy that thing to its full, to get the full experience out of that thing. A lot of times it does mean you just completely cannot enjoy it because of your disability. And that whatever thing that is that you cannot enjoy, that is a access barrier. That is a barrier that should be broken down. And that's kind of how the breakdown walls thing started. But anyway, So that's how I define accessibility and inaccessibility. And you'll hear me use the term blind accessibility a lot. And the reason I say that is because my specialty personally is specifically blind accessibility. I will and can discuss other disabilities and things that can be done for other disabilities as well. But it is wrong for me to think that I know more about those disabilities than people who have them. So I've always made it clear that my personal focus is blind accessibility, and then I'll be happy to mention other types as well if it comes up in conversation. If I'm working with a developer that's, hey, do you happen to know what we might be able to do for this? I might be able to throw something out there at you, but I'll always then refer you to someone else. But anyway, you'll hear me use the term blind accessibility because that's my specialty. So I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind.
Cool. What are some just some other things that come up when people really do ask you about your consultancy? What are the most common questions that really do come up about the field, I guess I should say?
What does that entail comes up a lot. A lot of people don't know what an accessibility consultant would do. So the assumption that people tend to make first is I'm just a game tester. And that's not correct. That's 100% incorrect. In fact, I do test games, but it goes beyond that. Because I not only test the game, I also work with the developers directly to provide them ideas for what could be improved, how something that isn't accessible right now could be made accessible. One of the things that I do is intentionally, maybe I'll play a game that I can't play, even if I know I can't play it. And that's intended as a demonstration. I can't play this, but here's why I can't play it. And here's what can be done that would allow me to be able to play that game. So it's a very hands-on job. It's not the game tester's job of standing against the same wall for 45 minutes and jumping up and down to see if it breaks the game. That's not what I do.
Right.
Mostly when I test games, they have something that's relatively playable, and they just want to, start ironing out accessibility features and finding out what works, what doesn't work, what I can do without help, what I need help with, and then we talk about how that can happen.
Sorry, I was adjusting my mic and didn't want to make any noise.
Too late.
So, you made a really interesting point when talking about, you talk about blind accessibility. And I just kind of had some questions because I think a lot of people could get kind of the obvious barriers that would happen for someone who might be sight impaired or blind. But what are the nuanced challenges? What are the things that people don't realize in the game design that does affect blind or sight impaired gamers?
Sure. First of all, I want to say that it's amazing how many things get wrong. People, and this applies to game developers and gamers alike. Game developers will get this wrong too. People assume all the time that they know the things that we would need to play a game, and they're almost always wrong. Sometimes we need more than what they think. Sometimes we need less than what they think. But to answer your question, I'm gonna use something that you might view as a very small thing as an example of a barrier for access. In games, when a menu wraps, which means that if you're at the top of the menu and you press up again, it wraps around to the bottom. Or if you're on the bottom of the menu, press down, it goes back to the top.
Right.
That is an access barrier. Why? Because in menus that wrap, we cannot count how many menu items exist. Because the menu keeps wrapping around and around and around. So we have no hope. We have no hope of memorizing the menu without an extreme amount of help, because the pressing buttons is never going to stop making the menu move. So if a menu doesn't wrap, we can go, okay, if I press down 5 times, I'm at the bottom of the menu, and then I can just go up once and I'm at the right option that I want. As an example. But we can't do that if the menu wraps. Now, of course, you can clear that up automatically if you just add narration to the menu. If the menu is supports speech of some kind. If the menu is talking to us, then we don't care if it wraps or not, because we can hear all the menu items. We don't need to memorize anything. So, but that's one of the little things that comes up a lot. Menus that wrap, if they're not going to be narrated, they are actually an access barrier. So if that's one of the things I always ask for is, if you're not going to narrate the menu, at least make it so it doesn't wrap so we can memorize it.
Gotcha.
How common is that narration support? That's not really anything I've ever really thought about.
Narration support is relatively new in mainstream games, but it's not as new as you might think. I can name you several games that have it right now. The Division 2 has menu narration.
Okay.
Gears 5 has menu narration. Crackdown 3 has menu narration. And Madden 20 has menu narration. And Mortal Kombat 11 has menu narration. In the case of Madden and Mortal Kombat, the menu narration is not complete. It's there's some menus it doesn't cover, but it's almost complete. It's still there. It's there enough that we can use it very well. Okay.
All right, I got you.
And there's more on the way where that came from. Believe me, it's becoming a more popular thing. The people who make all these engines, Sony, Microsoft, are starting to incorporate ways to add text-to-speech within games much easier. Microsoft especially is working on this. Sony needs to catch up on that a little bit, but there's hope. That's our cat, by the way. He agrees that Sony needs to get their act together and work on some text-to-speech fixes. But anyway, so yeah, they're starting to work on making it easier for developers to incorporate, and because of that, it's happening more. There's an API that exists for developers now where they can actually hook directly into Microsoft Narrator, which is the screen reader that actually is included with all Xbox Ones. So now developers can hook directly into that and literally just send text to it. So it makes it a lot easier to incorporate something like that on that kind of system. So, it is starting to pick up in popularity. But narration does not an accessible game make necessarily. It's more than just narration. But that's a big first step. It's a good way to start. So.
Yeah. So I guess just because we're kind of on this thread here, do a lot of the issues that you've run into, are they UI focused or are they gameplay focused issues?
There's a little bit of both. Good example. Ghost Recon Breakpoint. I actually got the opportunity to play that game a little bit early because it sent me and also some codes to give away to my chat, which I did, which is just fantastic. First time that ever happened to me. Anyway, Breakpoint. The UI for Breakpoint, if you're blind, is thoroughly awful. The reason for that is most games, especially on consoles, most games you'll have a menu where you can press the up and down arrows to move through it. Breakpoint is not like that. Breakpoint gives you a cursor that you have to move with the thumbstick to find the things in the menu you want to click on. Now tell me, how am I going to do that?
Oh, man. To be honest, that just sounds like one of those things, regardless, where you wouldn't even think about quote-unquote upgrading, because I'm sure that's probably the thought process they had was like, we'll change it to be something unique. But like that doesn't seem like the location to start like adding unique.
Yes,
like,
that is the thing. That is actually a tenet of discussions of accessibility is, it's okay if things look fancy. We just need an input method that works for us. You can make it look as fancy as you need to, but at least make it so, have your cursor, but maybe if we use the D-pad, then it jumps from item to item. You know what I'm saying? Make something that works for us. So you can have the menu you want, but you can still make that menu accessible. They could have done better, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna kind of. Do you have more examples? I'll let you kind of go on some more examples so people can have a solid foundation to understand the problem.
Yeah, obviously it goes beyond UI, but it very much depends on the game. I want to point out that blind accessibility is one. First of all, I will admit, and this is something that I have to admit to. It's a hard thing to do, but I have to admit to them as well. Blind accessibility is one of the most difficult types of accessibility that you can try to implement. It's one of the most difficult because there's so much to it. I'm not going to lie, we need a lot. Depending on the game, certain games would need less than other games. So let's say we were playing a game like the games Telltale used to make. I use this example a lot because it's an easy example to give. What we would need to make that game accessible is a menu-based navigation system that covered everything. So if we're standing in a room in a Telltale game, that's point-and-click adventure style. That's what you're supposed to do. Move the cursor, find the thing you're supposed to click on, boom, you do the thing. We would need an interactive menu instead of that interface where we wouldn't move a cursor around because we couldn't see the things around the room anyway. But we'd have a menu that would give us, in narrated speech, a list of the things available in the room. and if something was not interactable yet, or something was hidden, it would not list that thing until it was revealed. So that way, we could move through a menu, click on the thing we wanted to interact with, and just have that happen. And then you do the same thing with dialogue, choices. You have us allow us to narrate those choices in advance, and then when we click on one, it will make that choice. Of course, this would involve removing the timers because we need time to be able to read them. But essentially, once you've done those two things, you're done. With that type of game, that's it. Now it's blind accessible. Congratulations, you've done a great thing. Now, if you go to a different genre, like let's say a giant 80-hour open world adventure, you need different things for that, but you still can do it. I actually wrote an article. No kidding. I got an article published by gamesindustry.biz about this, and it's one of the accomplishments I'm proud of, because I'm just super happy they accepted my article. But anyway, so there's been a lot of talk. This is kind of a preface to what I'm about to say, but there's a lot of talk about how the games industry these days is too inundated with open world giants. Too many 80-hour giant games, 100-hour, 200-hour games you can jump into. There's too many of them. My whole thing in the article was responding. The article started. I got the opportunity to write it because I responded to a tweet asking about how I felt about 80-hour games, there being too many 80-hour games. And I said, well, my response is probably unique to everyone else's, because my response is this: I would love an 80-hour game that I could play, because we don't have any. And because I responded with that prompted the offer to basically they asked me to write the article after that. But anyway, 80-hour games, giant open world games, would need something different. They would need, for instance, a map interface that would be either one of two things, or maybe even both things. A 3D, interactable map that we can move around, and when we highlight a location on the map, that location is narrated to us, so we know what we're, highlighting when we move through things. Or a kind of, again, going back to the menu-based system. Menu-based is kind of an easy way to go when we talk about accessibility and trying to navigate large things. Menu-based is a good way to do it if you're talking about blind people here. So a menu-based system where we can move through different locations on the map, just through a menu, up and down, just left and right, whatever you want, just menu-based, and again narrated with the name of the location, the description if necessary, whatever you need, and then we click on that thing and it sets a waypoint to the thing. Once the waypoint is set, then you need a system where we can navigate to it, but it can't be a system that we can't interrupt, because in a giant open world game, we're going to want the opportunity to explore if we want to explore. So I tend to stray away from suggesting like auto walking. Don't do it for us. What you want to do instead is you want to do a system by which we can follow some kind of beacon. Be that an auditory beacon that plays, even if it plays constantly, as long as the sound effect is not annoying, it can play constantly. We can follow it by tracking it in surround sound or what have you. And that leads us to our waypoint. Or we can have it play on a key press, so we can determine which direction the beacon is in by pressing a button, and then we turn in that direction and we walk towards it. Or you can do another thing where you have a button press that turns us toward the way we're supposed to go. It doesn't have to play a sound effect or anything. It doesn't need to. It can, but it doesn't need to. A button that turns us in the direction we're supposed to go, so we can press that and then walk forward towards it when we want to do that. But whatever it is, no matter how you tackle that, there's a bunch of ways you can do it, but no matter how you do it, it cannot be something we cannot interrupt. Because what if, you're playing, let's just hypothetically, what if The Witcher 3 was accessible? And that game is loaded with side content that just happens out of nowhere. And what if we want to, what if we got our waypoint system and we were walking towards our waypoint and some of that stuff happened? Like, oh, there's a house there, and if you go to this house, you're getting a 3-hour quest line. What if we want to do that? So whatever it is, it can't be something that we can't interrupt. We cannot do. Don't play the game for us, is what I'm saying. And that's one of the huge things I have to do too. And this is a nice segue into another bit of accessibility talk here. Is I always tell developers not to remove challenge. Believe it or not, and this I know this could spark a lot of discussion, but here it is. Believe it or not, chat, we do not want easy mode. Accessibility does not have to mean easy. Challenge us. give us very difficult games, give us an accessible Dark Souls that is as difficult as Dark Souls is, but allow us to play it. There's a big difference between, oh man, you guys want easy mode, or that, and oh well, we just can't play the game at all. know. So
right.
It can't be denied that if a sighted person were to use some of the features that we would need to make a game accessible, it would make the game easier for them. But it wouldn't make the game easier for us because we need those features to play the game at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's hard to understand that what is easy for you might not be easy for someone else. It's hard to picture that. I hear a lot of talk, Sekiro is a game that really sparked this debate.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
A lot of talk about how people felt like if Sekiro added an easy mode, I'm using Sekiro now because we already bridged that. Broached that. If Sekiro added an easy mode, that it would detract from the game for anyone who used it because they wouldn't feel as accomplished bosses or whatever. They wouldn't feel the sense of accomplishment you felt after fighting a really hard fight and winning. Except that those that have motor disabilities or cognitive disabilities that can't handle the level of sheer skill that it takes to play the game on normal mode are going to have the challenge that they're looking for on that easier mode, or not, even if it's not an easier mode, don't call it easier mode. Make it an option where you slow down the game speed or something like that.
Right.
So the challenge that they'll experience on that slowed down version is equal to the challenge that everyone else is experiencing on the normal version, but people can't see that because they can only see, oh man, the game looks so slow. It's moving so slowly. This is super easy. It's that's Sekiro example. Sekiro obviously was not made for the blind to play it, but I'm giving that example because it's very relevant to accessibility discussion because that's what people always bring up these days.
Yeah.
Right.
But suffice to say, we don't want easy mode. We want equal challenge if it can be achieved, and we want to play your game. If you're a developer, we want to play your game, and that's what it boils down to. If you don't provide features for us to play the game, then we can't play it. It's simple as that. It's not a question of whether it's easy for us or hard. It's we can't play it. So
yeah. So because I looked at your Twitch channel and watched some of your videos, doing a little bit of cramming yesterday, and I saw, you were playing a variety of games. You were playing Jackbox, you're playing you were playing Phoenix Wright, and I saw you playing Ghost Recon Breakpoint, so it doesn't seem like it's an issue of the base game mechanics being inaccessible, but rather just like what is there already for you to kind of go off of. And so like when you're playing something that is in like a 3D environment and requires aiming or different interactions than just say clicking an option, how do you go about playing a game like Breakpoint? Or
so I want to stress real quick that Breakpoint is in a lot of ways not accessible to me. It's not a game I'm ever going to play again. It's a game I played once from Ubisoft, which is very gracious of them. Yeah. But I'm not going to play it again because it's not accessible. It's what you saw. If you watch that video, you'll see this. My chat is amazing. I don't know if you realize how amazing my chat is, but they were enjoying the stream. They're enjoying me talking about the challenges of the game and how it wasn't accessible and how difficult I was, a time that I was having, because that's one of the things that I do. I see that as important. I agreed to play Breakpoint. I agreed with Ubisoft that I would play it and stream it, knowing that it wasn't going to be accessible. Yeah. But I see part of my job is to educate. I need to be willing to show other gamers and developers that these challenges exist and how we get around them if we can, and how we don't get around them if we can't. So that's part of the job too. So I did it, and my chat, because they were entertained by it, because they were enjoying it, because they were enjoying learning about how I was doing, were very helpful. If you watch that stream, you'll see that they are guiding me to different places on the map. They're telling me which direction to go in, so I don't just walk around for 3 hours and don't do anything.
Yeah, and I saw them even like giving you like enemy counts and stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how we made progress during that stream. But that game is not accessible. I need to be clear on that. That game
Yeah.
is I will say though, I'll give the game some props. The aim assist in that game is pretty good. I was able to face enemies in surround sound, and when I fired at them, I hit them. So that's pretty cool. But it's still not. It's not going to be enough to make that whole game accessible. The game would need a lot more than that to make it accessible. But you know, so I think that kind of leads into the idea that I always call accidental accessibility. Because the games you're mentioning, a lot of the games you're mentioning that I play are not designed to be accessible to the blind, but they are accessible in small ways because of certain design choices that were made. So one of the games that I have been playing recently, Catherine Full Body, and you wouldn't think, a lot of people immediately say, "What? How are you playing that game blind? I mean, you have to move blocks around and jump up to different things, and it's ridiculous. How are you playing that game blind?" Well, the Full Body Edition just happened to add what they called safety difficulty. And in safety difficulty, there's two little things. One of them is you can't die, and the second thing is if you press R1 on one of the puzzle levels, it autoplays it. I mean, that's how I play. That's how I play that game. And then there's other sequences in that game where you're in a bar and you can answer texts from people, and they're like, "Okay, fine. Well, how do you do that?" Well, there's another workaround for that. A technology called OCR, which stands for Optical Character Recognition, and it is built into a lot of screen readers these days. So I use a screen reader called NVDA, and I use the PS4 Remote Play app on PC. So I launch Remote Play, it sends the feed from my PS4 to my PC. Then I scan that image with OCR and pull the text out of it, so I can then read it. So it's a huge workaround. It's a complicated workaround, but it makes the game playable. So who am I to argue with it? I mean, yeah, right. I certainly would like to have a version of the game that is actually playable, that is made to be playable by the blind, where the texts are narrated automatically within the game itself, and there's audio cues for the puzzles so I can navigate those myself. I would love to have that, but I don't have that, and this works. So, right. and it serves to demonstrate accessibility concepts. Like I can still say I can play this game because, like I just did, I explained to you guys how I played it. And that's what happens. People come to that stream and they're like, "How do you play this game?" And I'll give them this same speech. I'll educate them on how it works. So, Madden though is a game that I'm playing recently as well, and that one is modified to be playable by the blind. That one actually is specifically made for blind accessibility, which is tremendous. But a lot of the games that I play aren't necessarily; they're just accidentally accessible, and I will experiment all day with games to find out which ones are accessible by accident. And I'll try any game once. I'll tell you that. I even tried God of War 2018 and got further than anyone thought I would. So there.
Real quick, just because I saw this pop up in the chat, this is from Elliot Argues. He is one of the guys that runs Budget Arcade. He said, "What's the best game you've played in general?"
Okay, so that's a broad question. The reason that's a broad question is it's difficult to break down in simple terms because I also play audio games that are made specifically for the blind. Oftentimes these games are made by the blind as well. Not always, but oftentimes they are. And so, we have some good entries in that category. But a lot of the games that are audio games are games that you guys wouldn't have heard of, because why would you have? You don't need to play audio games. I actually do occasionally try to get a sighted person to try an audio game. It sometimes works and mostly it doesn't. But anyway, so the best audio game I've played is probably an RPG reminiscent of Pokemon called Manamon. That's probably the best one I can think of off the top of my head. It's so good. It's one of our very few. We don't have very many RPGs to choose from, and that's one of the best ones. So audio games, probably Manamon. Blatant Pokemon knockoff, but if you like Pokemon, you like Manamon too, as long as you're willing to deal with the fact there's no graphics. So that's a thing. Best non-audio game that I've played that I can play. It's hard to not say. See, the thing is, this is why it's so difficult to break down. if I restrict myself to a game that was made accessible to the blind specifically, I'm drawn to games like either Madden or Mortal Kombat 11, because Mortal Kombat 11 has menu narration that was added just for the blind, as well as an audio cue system for interactable objects during a fight.
Mhm.
So one of those two games would probably win just because they were modified to be accessible to me, and other blind people.
Right.
It's we have so few options for games that we can play without any concern, like any barriers, that it is hard not to. It's hard for a game that's made for us to play to not become our favorite instantly, because because like we appreciate it so much, because we appreciate the effort of the developer that did it to make that game accessible to us. Like there's a game called Sequence Storm. It is a rhythm game. It's a rhythm/racing game, if you can believe that. It's available on Steam. And when it was first developed, the blind were not considered in the slightest. However, this past summer, the developer spent basically 3 months reworking the whole thing to make that game accessible to us. It has full menu narration, complete menu narration. It has an audio mode for the rhythm. It's a rhythm game, so it's got instead of the scroll of notes you have to hit, it's an audio version of that, essentially. It's an audio cues mode instead of a visual cues mode. He just completely designed this whole thing to make this accessible to us because he wanted us to play it. And so that is probably one of my favorite PC games at the moment.
Yeah.
Because he took the time, and we recognize that, and we appreciate it, because it's becoming more common, but it's still such an uncommon thing that our favorite game is probably going to change a lot. It's like this. It's like if you guys had been playing on a regular Nintendo, even though it's 2019. Let's just say you've only played regular Nintendo games all this time, and then someone gives you a PS4 with loaded with stuff. That's how it is for us. Every time something new comes out that we can play, we're ecstatic about it. When we found out that Catherine was playable, I mean, it's Catherine. It's a weird little game that Atlas made, but we still jump for joy because look, it's a new game we can play. So that's why it's such a complicated question. But
yeah.
I did my best there.
No, and you gave me a little hook there that I actually was gonna ask, and you're talking about the game, like just kind of like in general how the games aren't designed for you, and you mentioned a little while ago some tools that you used. What are some tools or some hardware that people can use to make games more accessible for them? You were talking about a text-to-speech tool. Are there are there like special controllers or headsets that work really well to help with like blind accessibility, I guess? And
No, there are not. There are none. There's nothing like that out there. Controllers, we use the same controllers as anyone else. Headsets, I just use a good surround headset. I use those myself. That's just my personal preference. There's other ones out there. It doesn't matter which one you use. If you're a blind gamer, you're probably going to want surround sound though, because it gives you a better audio spectrum than it would if you're just listening to it in stereo. So it gives you a better idea of where things are in relation to you. So I recommend, if you're a blind gamer, surround sound. The screen reader that I was mentioning with OCR technology is actually free. So NVDA, you can find it at nvaccess.org, I believe, is the website for that. So if you ever wanted to try a screen reader to see what that's like, you can do it for free. So there you go.
Yeah. Hey, we like free around here. Our whole niche is trying to find budget stuff. So that's awesome. I mean, has there been is there anything that you just don't recommend? Has there ever been like a text to speech or anything that is supposed to be helpful but just is absolutely not worth it?
If you are going to, if you're doing it for games, do not invest in a screen reader called JAWS. JAWS is the most commonly used screen reader. It's very popular with government organizations and stuff, because they were one of the first screen readers out there for Windows. So they got they got government contract. Right. One of the first ones available, and it's. So get this, JAWS is super expensive. It's like $1,200 for the pro version, but the the OCR technology I was talking about, things like Phoenix Wright, and things like the text messages in Catherine, NVDA's OCR technology, which again, free, works better than JAWS does. So if you're doing it for gaming, don't invest in JAWS. But I will say that JAWS is a good screen reader. It just does certain things worse than other ones do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know I've accidentally accessed JAWS on like university computers. So I'm familiar with it a little bit, only because I've accidentally accessed it.
Yep. Most universities get licenses for the whole university, so that's typically how that works.
Let's see. Bren, do you have anything? Because I've been doing a lot of the talking here. Do you have anything that you have on the
wall? Please ask me things.
I was gonna say, I'm just curious about like certain things that most people kind of just ignore. So, for example, like Rumble and controllers. I feel like that, I'm sure, has some sort of like valuable use for like figuring out your location, things along those lines.
Let me talk to you about Rumble.
Right ahead.
Madden 20 is a perfect example. I talked about it earlier, but I only mentioned the narration. Madden 20 achieves gameplay accessibility almost entirely through force feedback, not through audio. What they gave us is, well, we have a couple of other things too. Like we have, for instance, there's an option in Madden 20 that is intentionally there for the blind that allows us to allow the CPU to assist us in steering our defensive player towards the ball carrier, try to stop them. So it helps us with that. But other things are achieved through force feedback. For instance, we can tell when a pass is thrown because of a certain force feedback that we feel at the time of the throw. We can tell when we can tackle someone or when we're about to be tackled by another vibration. We can tell if we're on offense, we can tell if the play we're running is a running play or a passing play based on whether the vibration is short or long. And one of the most important ones is the kick meter for field goals and for punts and things like that, and for the kickoff and all that. That is given to us with force feedback as well, so we can tell when it has reached maximum power and maximum accuracy with a vibration as well. So yes, Rumble is still a thing. It's still very much it's still a thing people use for accessibility, and it has its place. There are certain things that I think shouldn't be identified with Rumble. Like, I actually have brought this up to EA as well. The Rumble for the throwing of a pass, I actually don't like, believe it or not. I like that something is there, but I don't think it should be a rumble, and here's why. There is one rumble that tells us the ball is thrown. The rumble does not tell us whether the ball was thrown a long ways away or a short ways away, which means we don't actually know when to press the button to try to catch it. In my opinion, the pass cue should be an audio cue that is different depending on the length of the throw. But it's not. It's a rumble. That's what we have right now. So there you go. It is used, though, is the answer to your question. Yes, people...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for at least me personally, it always is like it's like an added feeling of immersiveness, really. And that's really, in my opinion, or at least what I'm imagining right now, is like those added immersive details probably really help shine for accessibility uses in particular.
They can, if it's done right, they can. I mean, keep in mind, the rumbles that I'm referring to right now were created just for the blind. It's actually a separate rumble setting in Madden 20 called Assist.
Okay.
Because the rumbles in Madden 20, if you leave it on default, are very different. They serve different purposes. They are there to kind of keep you immersed. But like, for instance, in Madden 20 by default, you feel the rumble when you get hit on the, you don't feel the rumble when you're about to get tackled. You feel it when you hit. So it's a whole different spectrum. It's a different setting entirely for the rumbles that we use to play that game. But yeah, the immersiveness is there in to some degree. In some games, if it's done right, it can help. It can also hinder, though, too. There are some games that just rumble too much.
Right.
And we just don't know why it's doing the thing that it's doing. It's just doing it, and something's happening, but whatever it is, who knows? So yeah, it can hinder and it can help. If it's done right, it can be good, but I just think it needs to be paired more with audio. Rumble by itself, I think, is not quite enough, in my opinion.
Right.
Is there a system, a console or whatever that is leagues better in terms of haptic feedback for you? In terms of like the quality of the haptic feedback in the controller?
No, they're both about the same right now. Both major consoles about the same. Switch is almost a non-factor because there's so few accessible games for the Switch that just doesn't matter much. I mean, if you're blind, I should say, there's very few accessibility things for the Switch. Nintendo doesn't really care much about blind accessibility right now, so we're trying to change that. But, currently, they don't really care.
Yeah,
but Xbox, PS4, both about the same. Goes.
Okay.
Obviously, mouse and keyboard. Probably, I don't think there's any haptic feedback or not very many options for haptic on mouse and keyboard.
There are haptic mice out there, but I think they're very seldom supported.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't matter to us because we don't use mice anyway.
Yeah.
Mice means typically a cursor movement type system. So.
Did you ever get your hands on like the Steam controller or a third-party PC controller at all? Was there one that you enjoyed at all? If you did,
no, I never have. It has kind of interested me, but every time I play a game on Steam, I typically PS4 controller.
You kind of cut out there a little bit. Can you say that again?
Yeah, every time I play a game on Steam, I typically use PS4 controller because I have them. So.
I'm not gonna have you repeat again, but you typically play Steam with a PS4 controller
or Xbox controller, depending. It kind of depends on what the game supports. Because I have a couple games on Steam that don't support PS4 controllers, so I'll use whatever. I have both, so I'll use that. Or I never usually use third-party controllers for anything.
Yeah. Now you said, and I appreciate you saying this, that you're not an expert in other types of accessibility, but
right.
I'm sure you have colleagues in the space, right?
I sure do. Plenty of them.
Who have different, whether it's the cognitive or deafness or maybe some sort of issue relating to their dexterity. What are some of the like really common things overlooked that your colleagues speak about?
Subtitle size is a big one for. I am constantly hearing about. This latest game comes out, and my low vision colleagues are always just like, great. They did it again. Really, really tiny text. That's just what I need,
That font size of 6.
Yep, that's a hugely common problem that's still happening today, and we don't know why, because there's so many examples. There's examples of games that do it so well. I understand that the Life is Strange series is among the games that do it the best, because they have so many different options for subtitle size. That people love that. So if you're looking for a good example, that's one. Motor impairments, controller schemes can be a problem a lot of the time. Inability to remap controls or remap buttons on any given game, or allow for a depending on the game, obviously, allow for an interface that needs fewer button presses to play the game.
Right.
Because if you're motor impaired, you might not be able to do that. You physically might not be able to do it. So that is lacking sometimes. There's some games that do well at that too. The MLB series from Sony is typically good about that. I think a lot of the recent Xbox titles have had full controller remapping, which is great. And they have the co-pilot thing too, which on Xbox, which is really a neat feature, especially for those who are motor impaired, because then you can have someone else playing with you that's doing half the work and you're doing the other half that you can handle, so that's another great thing. Cognitively, I've heard people say that some games it's hard to I understand that it's hard to understand cognitive impairment, but it can take a lot of different forms. And one of the things that I've heard people say is that some games actually throw too much at you at once. If you're cognitively impaired, you might be able to only accept a certain amount of stimulus from any given thing. And some games just throw so much at you and expect you to absorb it immediately. That that's where a lot of cognitive impaired people will struggle. They might not be able to remember this, 45-minute cutscene of what you're supposed to do in the next quest. So, it might be a challenge for them. So for them, you need things like, in fact, the Outerworlds is one example of a game that did this right. I saw someone remark on Twitter about how the Outer Worlds has a complete log of all of your conversations that you've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very helpful feature if you're cognitively impaired, because you need the ability to review things, and the Outer Worlds provides that to you. So there you go. Those are some features for other impairments that I can think of off the top of my head.
No, that's awesome. Ren,
Yeah.
do you have anything else that you want to ask? Or
No, that pretty much covered everything, honestly. Like,
I do want to add real quick that there is a mobile kit as well. There is, we can there are games that are accessible to us that are available on mobile as well, and a lot of those, not all of them, but a lot of those utilize either one or two things. They utilize the voiceover screen reader for iOS.
Mm-hmm.
Most,
mm-hmm.
not all, but most accessible games on mobile are for iOS because there's a lot of Apple haters out there that if they did one thing correctly, it's accessibility for the blind. They have championed it since the iPhone 3GS, and they have done it right, and they have continually done it right, and they've allowed developers to incorporate voiceover in their games. So a lot of games will support that, and if they don't support that, there's also a plugin for the Unity engine now. It came out a couple years ago, but it's starting to be used more often now, that allows a developer to basically recreate the functionality of a screen reader within their game, because Unity by itself is not very good for screen readers. But using this plugin, developers can recreate that, and thus we now have accessible mobile games as well as PC, console, and so we can enjoy that market as well to some degree.
Awesome. I kind of wanted to round out this conversation with just some suggestions from you, 2 to 3 games that whether they be audio only or that you've just really thoroughly been enjoying, for the folks out there. 2 or 3 games that you'd really recommend that you think do really well.
Yeah, okay. I'll actually throw a couple of them out there. I have one idea. Okay, so here we go. If you want to try an audio game and you're willing to try an audio game on mobile, then I actually have a free one that you can try. It's called Frequency Missing. It is an audio game that functions like a point-and-click adventure, and you play it by moving your finger around the screen and centering the sound effects you're hearing. Every sound effect you can hear is an object you can interact with. So you center it, then you tap, and you move toward that object and interact with it. So it's an entire adventure that works that way. 5-chapter adventure, and it's free. So Frequency Missing, there you go. There's one. If you're willing to try an audio game that you have to pay for, I have to recommend a game like Manamon, again, that RPG I mentioned before, or another RPG called A Hero's Call is another.
We lost you there a little bit. Hero's Call?
Hero's Call, yeah, it's another game we have, RPG. There's actually a game available on Steam. The first 2 games I mentioned are not on Steam. This one is. There's a game called A Blind Legend, which is an audio game as well, but it's one of the very few audio games that is available on Steam. So I wanted to mention that as well. Very soon, there's going to be another RPG coming out called The Veil, and I'm really looking forward to that. That's also going to be available on Steam as well. You might want to look that up. That has its own Steam page. It's not. They don't have a release date yet, but it's supposed to be coming out soon, according to them. So we'll see. And then, of course, games that are just generally accessible to the blind, that are not necessarily audio games. You want to go for Madden 20. You want to go for Mortal Kombat 11. Gears 5 if you want to play very specifically Horde mode. They worked to make Horde mode accessible, but not so much anything else. So that's one of my gripes with that game, but I won't get into that on this show. But that's available. And those are probably some of the best ones to jump into, especially if you're looking for a game that was made to be played by. Those are probably the best ones to jump into.
Awesome. Man, I think you've answered so many questions. You've been very enlightening on this topic.
That's the goal. That's my whole job. Well, half my job.
You do that half very, very well. Ren, is there anything else on this topic before we move on that you want to get out of there? Or Brandon,
no, I can't think of anything, to be honest.
Anything that you want to get out on this topic?
I think we're good. I think I've covered a lot of things. I think there's certainly more that I'm going to say, but it's in relation to about. So yeah, I think we're good.
So yeah, we have a little bit of news and stuff to talk about. I mean, Stadia is almost here. This is actually a week from today. Google Stadia will be released. And we've seen a little bit of news, not a lot. We've seen just, what games are coming to it. I think, Ryan, do you remember if we talked about the negative latency stuff?
Yeah, we talked mildly about it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's been some details about negative latency, which is a way that they're combating the actual latency that people might experience with streaming the game. There's just been a lot of talk on whether or not this will be successful. Brandon, you said before the show that you were a founders member.
I am, yes.
So I'm kind of curious about how you're feeling, and we haven't had anyone that has been like super gung-ho about Stadia, so I'm kind of interested to hear your piece on it. And
so the reason I decided to become is because I feel that it's, again, part of my job to cover new things, because I need to establish for the rest of the blind community whether or not it is a thing that they can use. But the perspective I wanted to provide you guys is that I think it is going to be potentially quite good for us specifically, for the blind community specifically. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the platforms that we have to deal with right now, Steam is a good example. Steam has a lot of issues in terms of us accessing Steam. It's not great. There's plenty of things that we can't do within the Steam application because they're just not accessible to us. It's not the Valve does care a little bit about accessibility. They have added some things, but there's still so much work to do. It's not great. However, here we have Stadia, which is probably going to have its own interface when it goes live as well. But it's going to go beyond that, because they're going to add, for instance, buttons to like game trailers for the games that are available on Stadia. You could watch a trailer for something, and there'll be like you can buy it and play it now. The existence of that button right there is actually quite important, because Google has a decent track record for labeling all their buttons properly, for making things accessible to us. They know what we need in terms of web development on the website to make a thing accessible. So Stadia might actually be, this is why I want to provide this perspective, be interesting, might actually be the easiest platform for us to purchase games on and play them. So in that way, I am excited for that, regardless of all the criticism about how it might work, latency, blah, blah, blah. I'm super excited about the fact that I might just be able to very easily interact with it. And that's something. Like, there's something to be said about that. People turned away from Steam before Steam added any features to help us out. People would turn away from Steam all the time because they just got too frustrated with it. So if Google keeps their current track record of making things decently accessible for us, and as long as those buttons in YouTube videos are labeled buy now or whatever, buy on Stadia, whatever they're going to call it, as long as that's labeled and viewable by a screen reader, and we can click that button, buy the game, and play it immediately. Okay, yeah, I think we're in. It's an interesting perspective, I think.
Yeah, no, that just kind of, because you're mentioning Steam specifically, is that pretty much how it is across the board between Origin and Battle.net and GOG?
I can tell you that Battle.net is also not very accessible. I cannot tell you about Origin or Epic Games because I don't have any. I don't have them. I've never had any reason to try them just yet. But Battle.net, I can confirm, is also not accessible to us.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't even think about like the stores themselves.
And that's why I'm here. Like that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I know that my perspective on these things is very different from anyone else's. I'm excited about Stadia for different reasons than anyone else is. So there you go.
Yeah, man, enlightening. there's a pun here, but I'm not gonna say it.
Oh, please do. Oh, please, thank you.
It's just been so eye-opening.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it?
But no, seriously, you're blowing my mind. Some of the stuff, like, I feel like the Buddha here, just like getting access to a whole new universe.
That is the reaction. That is a reaction I've provoked before, and is one I would intend to provoke many, many more times in my life.
So like, what else about Stadia is exciting you? Anything else in particular?
Yeah, so I'm one of those people that is very interested in technology.
Mhm.
I respect, believe it or not, I actually watch Digital Foundry videos, not because I can appreciate. They talk about graphics a lot, and I can't really appreciate that, but I can appreciate, the technology that goes into it. Even if it's something that I can necessarily take advantage of, I appreciate it for its existence, essentially. And I think a lot of the technology here is at the very least, it's got to be intriguing to some people. I think the things that Google is doing to combat latency
Mhm.
are clever, and I think it goes that negative latency thing. I don't know if you saw. There's a video that IGN did with their IGN first segment about Stadia, where they got a engineer at Stadia to talk about the whole latency issue,
Yeah.
and they actually broke it down pretty well. Like broke it down like really deeply. Like a lot of people, when the negative latency thing was first announced, a lot of people are like, okay, that's super stupid because it's gonna press buttons for you. It's like it's gonna predict what you're gonna press and just do it for you. And then if you press the wrong thing, it's gonna roll it back. That actually isn't exactly what it's gonna do. If you watch that video, um, it breaks it down in a way that so this is not gonna. Basically, it's like if so you're running these games on their giant monster beast servers of Doom that are just enormously powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So a machine like that is going to be capable of doing much more than running the game that you're playing on. And because it's capable of doing, like, it could run that game like 3 million. So because it's capable of doing that, it will do more because Google worked with the developers of each game specifically. It wasn't just like on live was just, okay, we have permission to stream the game, we're streaming the video to you, and that's all they did. They actually worked with the developers. They had the developers add Stadia to their engines, make versions of the games that are specifically made for Stadia, so the game will run itself, and it will do, on top of running itself, calculations to try and predict what you're going to do, and have basically be ready for you to do any of those things. It's not pressing the buttons for you, it's just holding in its system multiple calculations for the things you might do, because it has the power to hold that information along with run the game, and it's just ready for you to do those things more than a typical system would be. On top of that, they talked about their engine that is going to learn from things that happen. It's going to watch for latency to occur and learn from that based on the section of the game, based on the level of the game, based on that very moment of each game. It can pick out a scene and change the network settings based on what it needs to do. So like if developers can help this along too, they can add code to help this along too. But it'll try to learn automatically. Developers can help it along, so they can have it so on cutscenes in their game, it doesn't focus so much on performance. It focuses on resolution and graphical quality, because that's what you want. You're not interacting with the game at that point, so you don't really need to worry about latency in a cutscene. So it's going to focus more on the resolution and keep your quality up.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes back to gameplay, it'll immediately seamlessly switch its own settings to account for the gameplay side, so you get as little latency as possible. I know this is a lot, but I just think that technologically what they're doing is interesting, and I think it's clever, and I think it might work.
Yeah, I've been pretty lukewarm on Stadia. I love the idea. I love the technological ideas behind it. As someone who does media and stuff like that, I immediately saw some other uses for it myself, and I'm like, oh, that would be really awesome for video editing and stuff like that. Were there like some other uses for Stadia that, like, if they were to like expand outside of gaming with this technology, that you would be like super stoked on?
Oh yeah. I'm thinking of things like owning JAWS. I told you about JAWS, the very extreme screen reader. Well, what if you never had to own JAWS? What if you could run JAWS from the cloud?
Mm-hmm.
Not pay $1,200 and have a screen reader that functioned as well as JAWS does in most things, and it's at your fingertips in the cloud. That'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah, what are your initial feelings on the success or failure of Stadia? I mean, are you feeling like the Stadia is going to be a success ultimately, or?
I think it is. I think it's going to get a lot of hate because
Mhm.
I mean, it already is getting a ton of hate, but it's going to get more because that is the nature of the beast that is humanity. Um,
Mhm.
people are gonna find 1 second of latency, and that's going to be a viral video. I guarantee it. Even if it runs fairly well, people will just pick one thing out and turn it into a thing. It's going to get a lot of hate, but I think it is going to be successful because I think, and I really believe this. I think if anyone is going to do this, I think Google's the right people to. They have, they have the server infrastructure, they have the technology, they have the teams, they have the money. Let's face it, they have the money.
Mhm.
It's not a situation like, again, I bring up OnLive because OnLive was a cloud gaming service that I actually subscribed to because, again, I like tech. So when OnLive came out, I was super into it. I know it had latency. It had quite a bit of latency, but it was still cloud gaming, and I was like, that's neat. Like, that's a cool idea back in 2007 or whatever that was.
Yeah.
But that system ultimately failed. But I just don't think this will. I think there's too much behind it for it to fail completely. It might not get super great subscriber numbers, but I don't think it'll fail. I mean, look, whether you like it or not, the Founders Edition sold out. Okay, that's still a thing. That's still saying something.
Yeah.
So,
actually, I did have a question because the Founders Edition comes with the Stadia controller.
yes.
Have you had any experience with the Stadia controller? And if you have, what did you think about it? Because I don't know if I've seen anyone actually get their hands on it yet.
No, I don't have it yet. It's not supposed to arrive until launch day. So I have until 19th to wait for that. But I have no experience so far. I'll be happy to tell you once I try it.
Yeah, for sure. Let us know, and we'll link it out to people because I'm super curious as because it looks very similar to like the Xbox controller, in terms of kind of the profile and shape. But I'm curious about the haptics and some of the other.
Yeah, I wonder if it does have haptics. I don't even know. I don't even know if it's going to have haptics or not, and that could be a swaying factor. Who knows? We'll see though. I do intend to cover Stadia's launch. I mean, that's why I'm a founder, because I wanted to cover the launch. So I'm going to cover it. There's probably going to be videos on my YouTube channel because because it's Stadia, I can literally press a button and broadcast to YouTube. So that's a thing. I actually like that feature, believe it or not. But anyway, there'll be probably YouTube videos, and there will be podcast discussion as well next week on that. So.
Excellent.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that we link out to all your stuff in the description of the episode so people can subscribe and see all that stuff right away.
Yeah.
Anything else on Google Stadia? I'm kind of looking at the time here. I know we want to talk about one more thing before we end.
No, I think I gave you the perspective that I wanted to.
Yeah.
I think you found it interesting. So there you go. That's what I wanted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we haven't I don't think that many people we've had on. It's been either lukewarm or very skeptical of Stadia. I don't think we've had anyone on that have really felt more than just lukewarm on Stadia.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I should be clear. I certainly have concerns. I'm not like, oh my god, it's so great. But I think I'm more positive than negative.
Yeah.
Even if it boils down to the reasoning being because it's probably going to be easy for me to access, and that's important to me. So.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else on this, guys?
I think we're good.
Cool. Ren, you've been playing a game. It's one of those 80-hour adventure
games. Sorry.
I know, right? It's crazy. Yeah, so I've been playing Outerworlds recently. Not super recently, it's been a little bit, but I grabbed it on release. Fortunately, thank the gods for this, but because Xbox Game Pass is like $1 for the first month, it made this an immediate pickup, regardless of if I wanted to play it or not. I was just like, yeah, obviously I'm just gonna play this, and I am very happy I did. To be completely honest, I'm very happy I did. It's from Obsidian, the same makers as New Vegas, and most people, a good 99% of people, will compare it to like directly to New Vegas, which is pretty fair. It feels like a much more expanded version of that same sort of style, and the style of your choices actually do matter versus recent Bethesda games. Fallout 4 76. But in comparison to those, the choices actually do matter. You can go through an entire playthrough and kill everybody if you want to, and you can still beat the game, which is not something that you could do in like classic Bethesda games. If you try to kill the like first main character, he just goes down and then stands up like 5 seconds later and asks, "How are you?" And then that's essentially it. But yeah, I found that it was just a lot more diverse. It seemed like they expanded in the right direction. Like if New Vegas, instead of like becoming into Fallout 4, it just feels like a completely different turn. Like almost if you lived in a parallel universe and they were just like, yeah, let's not do this and let's do it this way instead. That's how it feels. I don't know. There's a lot more dynamic abilities that come with just base leveling. So for example, in like old school titles such as New Vegas, you would pick up like small gun skill or something like that, and it would just increase your gun damage, and that's it. But each and every skill has its own ability, like subtree, in its own like case. So if you get like your persuasion up to a certain amount, you can persuade enemies to fight for you passively. Like they'll fear you and run away, or they'll like embrace just how strong you are as a person and just be like, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm done. But it's things like that, and it's really cool to like see that, because that just seemed like the proper way to take these to take the Fallout name, at least in my eyes. I'm definitely comparing it really hard to Fallout, but it's definitely fair.
I mean, it was co-created by Tim Kaine, the creator of. I think you're okay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I will say, so while you're playing through the game, you become a captain of a ship, and you start gathering crew members. That's one of the big things that occurs during the game. And I found that some of the crew members like just kind of came on too easily. Like some of them you have to like do a quest line for, and they just it feels natural that they want to join you in your cause. Versus literally the second planet you go to, you talk to a guy, you say hi, and he's like, I want to be a mechanic on your ship. And you're just like, hold on, I just met you. You're not touching my giant like spaceship that's like multi-million dollars. It's not gonna happen. I found that to be really weird, but most of the characters made like it felt natural in terms of dialogue. It didn't feel really off, with just that exception, because you literally learn 5 seconds before he like wants to be on your ship that like he has a problem with authority. You're a ship captain. I don't know why you'd want him on your ship if he has a problem with authority. And like he had such a problem with authority that he tried to beat somebody, like beat an officer of the law with like a bat, essentially. And it was just like, why in the world would I ever bring this guy? But your character's just like, I mean, maybe I'll consider it. I'll think about it. And it's like, all right, okay, okay, buddy. Some of the characters, with the exception of that one, specifically that one was the only one I had a real issue with, have a lot of depth to them that I wasn't expecting them to. I talked to like a vendor, and he was wearing like a helmet of the company that he's trying to represent. And essentially, this isn't too spoilery because this still happens relatively early into the game, but you start to learn that he was kind of forced into this life and he does not want to become a part of it. But he's almost like slave trained to just live this life as a vendor, and that's all his purpose is. And you'll even like go in through his like specific notes and stuff, and you'll be like, oh my god, how do I save you?
He was trained to be an NPC, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And even to the degree where I thought it'd be funny if I talked to him using the same helmet as him, and his response was like, oh no, they got you too? Oh god, we're all screwed. And I was like, whoa, hold on, calm down. It's gonna be fine. But it was moments like that where it felt very very interesting. It felt like it had its own personality. In terms of graphics, it's not exactly the most like graphically appealing game. It doesn't look like it's some crazy next gen game by any stretch of the imagination, but the graphics hold their own for the environment that it's in. When I think of like the old school Fallout games, I don't think like, man, those games sure look fantastic, but they represented what it was meant to be. It was meant to be a wasteland, and you definitely got that feeling. This was very much like everything's corporate. It felt like the most like anti-corporate game I've ever seen in my life, because 99% of the quests that I've done are like, hey, corporate's being an asshole. Should I like side with corporate, or should I side with people wanting to be free? And I was like, I don't know. We'll see. But
this game was made by a developer that was just purchased by a major.
exactly. But I don't know. I found the experiences to be really individualized and unique. So I, for example, was playing like a melee charismatic character that is not gonna take someone's shit. Essentially, that was pretty much the gist. But he's also extraordinarily dumb too. That was like the main thing. So if you like tone up or tone down your base perks, you can get access or get locked of access to certain things. So if you have a lack of an endurance skill, for example, you don't regen health at all. You get 0 health regen. You have to rely exclusively on medical supplies. My character had no intelligence, so he just had dumb dialogue options. And somebody was all like, oh, you're just going to kill me, so get it over with. And the dumb dialogue option was like, all right, if you want me to, and
Okay.
murder him. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, I have to choose this one. Like, I
kill you now.
Yeah, exactly. But the starting area is like, you need a power supply for your ship. And my response was like, I showed up to go take their power supply, and they're all like, if you take it, I'll murder you. And I was like, I'm gonna murder everybody here if you talk to me again. Let's just be honest here. I'm gonna kill everybody. And he's like, all right, just take it, please go. And that was it. And I was like, cool, easy quest, hell yeah. But yeah, somebody else's experience can be totally different, where they like sneak in and steal it and then just like flee the scene. But yeah, I don't know, it felt very unique, individualized, and exactly what I wanted out of a game like this. And for $1, I don't know why you wouldn't pick it up. Really? Yeah. I have no idea.
Ooh, I do, because I can't play it.
Oh, man.
And I got you there. All right.
Okay, I can think of one idea. A single idea, but that's all.
There you go. All right.
For those who can play the game, is this worth picking up full price, or is this like a wait for sale or maybe rent it?
I don't know why you would pick it up full price, to be honest. Like, it comes with the Game Pass, and if you get the Game Pass, it's like you're gonna take maybe
if you get Game Pass Ultimate, you have PC and Xbox. Exactly,
and that's what I have. I have PC Ultimate, so I just play it on my PC, and if I wanted to, I could play it on my Xbox too if I really wanted to.
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't think it's worth picking up at full price just because it doesn't make sense. Like, if you're a big fan and you're just like, I want a retail copy, then sure, go for it. But I don't see the purpose personally.
If someone wants to be a complete and utter shill.
I honestly, basically. Oh man.
Yeah, I saw this game get a lot of praise from a lot of people, especially because there's a lot of people who really wanted Bethesda to get stuck, which fair enough, right? Completely with how Bethesda's been this last year and a half, completely fair. Has there been anything that's been absolutely like game breaking in this? Has there been anything that you just kind of look at this and it's just like, why, what's like the level of polish on it?
When I think of polish, I think of detail, and there's a lot of detail that's going on. It might not look like the most graphically appealing like games, so there's not a whole metric ton of environmental storytelling, but there's enough there that you can really like understand that like something happened, and all you have to do is like go through like maybe a few like audio logs or text logs and be like, oh, okay, that happened. Like I started the game expecting like go get a power supply, and then I just like I was reading like a text log that I found in the middle of nowhere, and I was like, wait a second, hold on, what's this about? And I like stumbled across a person related in the note.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't talk to them directly about it, but I was like, all right, what if I go into their house and look at their logs, right? I'll just start like figuring all this out, like go in detective mode out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's really cool that you could do that.
The lore is there for you to unravel. That's really neat. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. It didn't feel like I just kind of went into an area just to leave. Like, it didn't feel like a stop, really. I'm just like, yeah, you gotta go grab the thing, and then you gotta get out of here and then go to the next place. I don't know. That I feel has been, like, one of the big problems with maybe not Fallout 4, because I feel like Fallout 4 does a fairly good job of environmental storytelling.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actual, like, character storytelling, I feel like it's very, like, heavy-handed, where they kind of just spill it at you and you're forced to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Versus just like, oh, I can ignore, if I wanted to, I could totally ignore this person and go about my life. That's totally an option. I didn't have to go do any quest for anybody. If I wanted to, it'd just be like, I'm gonna kill everybody, I'm gonna take the power core, I'm gonna leave. That's my choice. I can do that. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like that has to like speak some level of volume toward its polish.
Yeah. Did you see any bugs or anything that like, why is this guy's health not going down? Why am I stuck on this path? This guy just went through a wall. Nothing like that.
Nothing along those lines. No, not like a certain other game that I'm definitely thinking of right now that I probably talked about on release and made those exact accusations. 76, but yeah, no, nothing like that. Nothing at all. I feel like maybe I ran into... I'll say there's certain moments where the information that you need to pay attention to isn't exactly... I didn't know how to hack for like a certain point of time. I thought that one of the requirements was like a certain material or something like that, because there are materials that you use for hacking or lockpicking. And there was another counter above it, and I had no idea what that was. And it doesn't tell you anywhere in the game. And it has the specific little indicator and icon, but that icon's never mentioned. And it turned out that was the hacking skill and the lockpicking skill. I thought that was just kind of like not relevant to it. I thought that was just kind of like a matter of like what materials you got out of a box, for example. But yeah, with the exception of that, where like certain areas don't really tell you everything that you need to know, it was pretty solid. I had no issues, really.
Gotcha. I think you answered all my questions on the Outerworlds. Brandon, do you have any thoughts or opinions or questions on Outerworlds at all?
Honestly, no. I mean, I've listened to, honestly, my whole exposure to the Outerworlds, listened to a little tiny bit of playthrough to get an idea what it sounded like. And other than that, I don't really know much about it. I know some of the things you mentioned because of that point playthrough, like the stealing the power core, the getting your ship, that kind of thing. I know about that stuff, but that's essentially as far as I've actually watched in a playthrough. So I'm not up on my Outerworlds knowledge, but I do definitely respect the Outerworlds willingness to allow you so much freedom, while at the same time keeping you in that RPG mode. Right.
Exactly. Even at like in the middle of the game, it tells you that it's definitely a bad idea to go to this crazy planet filled with monsters, but you can still go there. You can totally
really
still go there. I went there and I was like, I'll be fine. And then I got absolutely decimated by like a bunch of monsters of doom. I'm like,
I just wish that after you got decimated, it was like, we told you.
Oh man, but yeah, it didn't feel like I was level locked to anything. It didn't feel linear. Like it felt like the linearity I chose to make, not so much just like, oh, I need to go here to go here to go here.
Yeah,
it was just like, if I want to, I could totally just skip like the relay station, just go to Death Mountain, and just fail miserably.
There's no
all the time.
There was. Did you hit like any like walls? Like I'm thinking very specifically of like Fallout New Vegas, where when you leave, the first town you're in, trying to get to Vegas. There's the quarry that's in between them, and the quarry is infested with deathclaws, and you can't get through because the deathclaws are there. So it makes you route around to Novak. There was nothing like that either that you saw.
Yeah. So the way that the areas work is there is some open worldness to planets, because you actually just go from planet to planet. It's not necessarily like New Vegas where it's just a giant one single map and you can go around all through that way. So nothing necessarily like that, but there are moments where you're like, yeah, I definitely shouldn't do this. Like I shouldn't do this. Like a moment right there that I was talking about where like I can go choose to go to the death planet. I have a quest to go there, but I am so not ready. And it shows when I go there and just get mauled to death by some giant monster of doom. And like all my teammates are like, I don't know if this is a good idea. This feels dumb. And it's like, I'm dumb. Get over it. I'm going in.
It's like, have you had a conversation with my character?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, if there's nothing else on Outerworlds, we can kind of wind the show down here. Brandon, for the people who have joined us about halfway through, why don't you tell them what you do and where they can find all of it?
Yep, absolutely. My name is Brandon Cole. I am a creature of many hats, a blogger, a podcaster, a streamer, an advocate for accessibility, and consultant in the game industry for accessibility of video games for the blind. And you can find me at SuperBlindMan at almost everything. Twitch is SuperBlindMan, YouTube and Twitter also SuperBlindMan. My website is brandoncole.net. My blog is there, and my consultancy page is there if you want to know about me. My media page is also there, so you can see things on the internets. You can see a bunch of articles about me and a bunch of speeches that I made and things like that. All the things are there. Yeah, pretty much. Oh yeah, also the Breakdown Walls movement I'm a part of, co-run by my fiance. We call it the Breakdown Walls movement because our aim is to break down the barriers between the disabled and non-disabled gamers, streamers, basically just people all over the world, and just come together, have a good time, and chill and just realize that we're all people and we're all gamers and we're all here for the same things. So if you want to join us there, our Discord is breakdownwalls.net/discord. And if you'd like to listen to my podcast, which covers gaming news from two different perspectives, we cover the standard perspective, your typical gaming news perspective. Then we cover the disability side of the gaming news perspective, as well as interviews and just general rants about games. You can do that too at breakdownwalls.net/podcast. And there's a new episode every week. There you go.
Awesome. And links for that will be in the description of the podcast and the VOD. Once again, thank you to my mod, Mr. Green Elite, for providing links in the live chat there. Ren, what's coming up on your channel?
Yeah. So for me, I've been playing a lot of Destiny 2 recently. I'm probably going to actually do a little bit of that in maybe like 45 minutes, do like a short stream, but we'll see. I'm also playing off stream as like a personal project. I'm currently playing Death Stranding, and I don't want to get super into details about it right now, but I'm planning on doing like an analysis piece on it, and I'll have that up in maybe like a couple weeks. We'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much what's going on for me. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/renditions with 2 Z's because I'm dumb and I can't spell my own name. That's basically it for me, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, with Death Stranding, you gonna get like super Freudian with it? Are you gonna like? are you pulling out your philosophy books, ready to really dig deep into what Kojima's trying to say about ladders and babies?
We'll see. Oh man.
Coming up on my channel, well, first off, we are in the midst of my fundraiser for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I kind of adjusted the goals, and we made our first goal, which is a cooking stream. So I got to figure out what kind of meal I want to make on stream. Our next goal is $50 for a full workout stream, in which anyone who has Streamloots cards and really wants to make me suffer can make me work out way more than I intend to. It's going to be guided. We're going to get all dressed up and get the cheesy music and everything, so you guys can join me in working out and try to work off some of your weight before or after the holidays, kind of depending on where that falls, because Lord knows I'm trying to lose some of this too. So yeah, I'm still in the middle of that, playing Far Cry 3 right now. We're gonna move on to 4. We're getting pretty close to the end of 3. So Far Cry 4 is next, and then kind of depending on how long it takes us to beat Far Cry 4, we'll go on to Far Cry 5, or maybe we'll touch Blood Dragon a little bit or something. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Let's see. We hope you guys enjoyed the show. We appreciate all of you who come and watch us live. We appreciate all of you who, if you guys can't make it live, go and watch our VODs and listen to the podcast on the go. If you guys missed any part of the show, you can find us on YouTube. You can watch the VOD on Twitch. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, basically any podcast platform. And if we're not on one that you want us to be on, let us know. We'll get there for you. We want to be where all of you guys are. If you guys like what we do, you can help support the show by dropping a follow to me, Ren, or our guest. Make sure you guys do support our guests. We really appreciate when they get some love from you guys. Other ways you can help support us is just leave a rating and review on the platform of your choice. We really appreciate that as well. Just a reminder for anyone who hasn't seen the Twitter account, I converted to a personal Twitter account. So the @NTN is now @DannyK. Let's see. I think that's all the housekeeping I have to get out of the way. Another huge thank you to Brandon Cole for coming on the show. We really appreciate you coming on and enlightening us on on the topic of accessibility.
Sure.
Another thank you to Marcus Axford for connecting us to you, Mr. Cole.
Yeah, and if you ever want me back, hey, I'll come back. I don't mind.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get you back, especially if there's anything big relating to accessibility that we hope you can.
There may be a thing that may happen at some point that I can't talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk about right now that you may want me back. Talk